A dog is running through a field of fire. Not metaphorically, not in the distance. He is crossing no man's land, the most lethal strip of earth in human history, while artillery shells tear the ground apart around him. He has been trained for this. He knows where he is going, and he will not stop. The message capsule is strapped to his collar. The men who sent him are alive or dead by now. There is no way to know. What they do know is this: if he makes it, an entire unit might be warned in time. If he doesn't, the ambush will be a massacre. His name is not recorded in any English history book, but what he carried across that field and what he represents changed the way every army on earth would fight for the next 100 years. Who was he? And why has no one ever told his story? The year is 1914. Europe is tearing itself apart. Within weeks of the war's declaration, millions of men are swallowed into trenches stretching from the Belgian coast to the Swiss border. The Western Front is a 700-kilometer scar across the continent, muddy, frozen, and completely impassable. Communication between units became one of the most deadly problems of the entire war. Telephone wires were cut by shellfire within minutes of being laid. Human runners rarely survived open crossings. Carrier pigeons, while useful, were unpredictable and slow. Germany had anticipated this problem years before the first shot was fired. As early as the 1870s, the German military had been quietly developing what would become the most sophisticated animal-assisted military program in history. By 1884, the German Red Cross had begun formal experiments with Sanitätshunde sanitary dogs, trained to locate wounded soldiers on the battlefield and guide medics to them. Germany wasn't improvising. It was executing a plan that had been decades in the making. At the center of this story is one man and one breed. In 1899, 15 years before the war began, a German cavalry officer named Max von Stephanitz attended a dog show in Western Germany and purchased a dog he named Horen von Grafrath. That dog became the founding sire of the German Shepherd. Von Stephanitz spent the next 3 decades systematically engineering the breed for one purpose: working intelligence, not beauty, not companionship, intelligence, loyalty, and physical endurance under pressure. He could not have known how perfectly he was building a soldier. By 1914, Germany had registered over 6,000 trained war dogs on a national roster. When mobilization orders went out, the dogs mobilized too. The German military's dog program was not an afterthought. It was a division. The Militärhund, military dogs, were organized under the same logistical structure as artillery units. There were breed standards, performance evaluations, and regional kennels distributed across Germany specifically so that dogs could be requisitioned and deployed like any other military asset. When the war began, the army issued a national appeal to German civilians. Donate your dog to the fatherland. Thousands responded. Farmers, aristocrats, and city families brought their animals to collection points. The bond between the German people and their dogs was not incidental to this program. It was the foundation of it. The dogs selected for service were rigorously assessed. Temperament first always. A dog that panicked under artillery fire was useless, or worse, a liability. The trainers were looking for what they called nervenfestigkeit, nerve strength, the ability to remain focused and responsive under conditions that would break a human being's concentration entirely. German shepherds passed this test at higher rates than any other breed. Their intelligence was only part of the reason. The other part was their relationship to human command. Von Stephanitz had bred out the pack instinct in favor of handler bonding. A German shepherd would follow one person's instructions with a devotion that approached something almost philosophical. These were not animals that obeyed out of fear. They obeyed because they chose to. Of all the tasks assigned to military dogs, messenger work was the most dangerous and the most vital. A human runner crossing no man's land had perhaps a 1 in 3 chance of surviving. The statistics for dogs were better, not because shells discriminated, but because a dog's profile was smaller, its movement faster, and its instinct to find cover more refined. A trained messenger dog had something else too, a destination it wanted to reach. The dogs were bonded to two handlers, one at each end of the route. The dog was not running away from the artillery. It was running toward someone it knew. This distinction mattered enormously. It made the difference between a dog that hesitated and a dog that completed the crossing. The message capsule was typically a small aluminum cylinder attached to the dog's collar or strapped to its back. Inside, orders, coordinates, casualty reports, or urgent warnings of incoming attacks. These messages could not be sent any other way. The telephone wire was down. The runners were dead. The pigeon was gone. The dog was the last channel of communication between a unit and its command. When the dog arrived, muddy, sometimes bleeding, always panting, the capsule was removed with hands that shook slightly. The message read, and decisions were made that affected hundreds of lives. Parallel to the messenger program ran the Sanitätshunde, the medical detection dogs. The casualty numbers in WWI were unlike anything in modern memory. The Battle of the Somme alone produced 57,000 British casualties in a single day. On the German side, the scale was similar. After major offensives, the wounded lay in no man's land for hours, sometimes days. Many died not from their injuries, but from exposure, because no medic could reach them under continued fire. The Sanitätshunde were trained to do what no human could: move silently through the darkness, locate living men among the dead, and signal their handlers. A dog that found a living soldier would sit beside him and bark, or return to its handler with a piece of fabric taken from the wounded man's clothing, a method called the Voorlorenbringer, the bring-back signal. This was not a simple trick. It required the dog to distinguish between the living and the dead, a task that required detecting breath, warmth, and the subtle biological signals of a body still fighting to survive. Modern science has since confirmed what these trainers observed in practice. Dogs can detect changes in carbon dioxide levels, blood oxygen, and body temperature that are completely imperceptible to human senses. These dogs were not performing. They were solving a problem that had no other solution. The records kept by the German military were meticulous by the standards of the era, but the names of individual dogs rarely made it into documents preserved in accessible archives. What survived were incident reports, cold, bureaucratic summaries of outcomes. But between the lines, the individual acts are unmistakable. In the winter of 1916, somewhere along the Verdun corridor, the bloodiest single sector of the war, a messenger dog completed 7 consecutive crossings of a contested communications route in a single day. The route had already killed 2 human runners. The dog was hit during the 6th crossing, a fragment wound to the left hindquarter. It completed the crossing anyway. It completed the 7th run the following morning. No medal was recorded, no name preserved. But the unit it served had 7 more chances to communicate and 7 more chances to survive. By 1915, British military intelligence observers had begun filing detailed reports on the German dog program. The reports were unambiguous. The German dogs were faster, more reliable, and more adaptable than any communication method the British or French had deployed. The French army, which had initially dismissed military dogs as a German peculiarity, began emergency training programs within 18 months of the war's start. The British followed. Both programs were modeled, sometimes directly, on the German system. This was not acknowledged at the time. It would have been politically unthinkable to credit the enemy with a military innovation. But military historians who have examined the French and British training manuals of 1915 and 1916 have noted the structural similarities are too specific to be coincidental. Germany invented the template. Everyone else copied it. And history, written by the victors, left that fact out. Here's the number that should stop you for a moment. By the end of the war in 1918, Germany had deployed over 30,000 trained military dogs across its various fronts. The British, who came to the program late, deployed approximately 7,000. The French, somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000. The Americans, who entered the war in 1917, deployed fewer than 500, and most of those were borrowed from European allies. 30,000 dogs, many of them German shepherds. Each one trained, transported, fed, and medically treated as a functioning member of the military apparatus. The logistical operation alone, feeding tens of thousands of large, working dogs in active war zones, was a feat of military organization that has never received the attention it deserves. Stories like this one, ones preserved in German military archives but never translated, never narrated, never given the attention they earned, are exactly why Silent Guardians exists. If this is your first time here, welcome. These are the story's history almost filed away for good. If you've been with us a while, you already know what we're about to do next. The Eastern Front demanded different things from the dogs. Unlike the relatively static trench lines of the West, the Eastern Front was a war of movement, vast distances, brutal Russian winters, and terrain that made communication even more precarious. Here, the sentry dogs, Gefechtshunde, took on greater importance. Trained to detect human presence and alert their handlers silently, a sentry dog could identify an approaching enemy patrol at distances of up to 500 meters, long before any human ear could register movement. The silence of that alert was critical. A barking dog gave position away. A trained sentry dog would stiffen, orient its body, and make eye contact with its handler. One gesture, no sound. The patrol adjusted accordingly. In sub-zero temperatures, in forests without visibility, that silent warning was worth a company of scouts. It is impossible to tell this story without acknowledging the handlers. The Hundeführer, the dog handlers, were drawn from across the German military. Some were professional dog trainers in civilian life. Many were young infantrymen who had formed a bond with a specific animal during training and were assigned to that dog for the duration. The bond between a Hundeführer and his dog was recognized by the military as operationally significant. Separating a working team broke the dog's performance. The pair was kept together whenever tactically possible. Letters home from German soldiers occasionally mention their dogs in ways that are striking for their casualness. Not as equipment, as companions. One letter from 1916, preserved in the German military archive in Freiburg, describes a handler writing to his mother. "Argo found me yesterday when I had lost my way in the fog. He came back for me on his own. I think he is smarter than most of the officers." At the end of the war, on November 11, 1918, the guns went silent. And for a moment, for the first time in 4 years, the silence was complete. The men came home, or what remained of them. The armies demobilized. The trenches were abandoned. The horses that had survived were sold at auction. The pigeons were released. And the dogs, the 30,000 dogs that had run through fire, found the wounded in the dark and carried the last words between men who had no other way to speak to each other. Most of them were never recorded. Most of them were never named. There were no monuments, no formal ceremony. The German military kept its records, but the world that the war had created had no appetite for honoring the previous one's machinery. The German Shepherd, the breed that had carried so much, went on to become a family dog, a police dog, a film star. Rin Tin Tin, the most famous German Shepherd in history, was found as a puppy on a French battlefield in 1918 by an American soldier. He became a Hollywood legend. The breed crossed every border. The story of where it had come from and what it had done stayed behind. There is something in that image, one dog looking out at a field that no longer has a purpose, that captures the particular grief of the war dog's story. They served without ideology, without propaganda, without the ability to understand what any of it was for. They only understood their handler, their route, their task, and they completed it every time. The German Shepherd did not disappear from military service after 1918. If anything, the breed's wartime performance accelerated its adoption worldwide. By the Second World War, the German Shepherd was the dominant military and police working dog across Europe, the Soviet Union, and eventually the United States. The canine units that operate today in every modern military and law enforcement organization on Earth trace their doctrine, their training methodology, and their assessment criteria directly back to the system that Max von Stephanitz and the German military refined between 1870 and 1918. The breed registry that von Stephanitz maintained, the Verein für Deutsche Schäferhunde, the Society for German Shepherd Dogs, founded in 1899, still exists. It is the oldest working dog registry in the world. Every registered German Shepherd alive today can trace its lineage back to that registry, back to Horen, back to the beginning. In 2013, the German government quietly included a small memorial acknowledgement of WI animal service in the national commemorations leading up to the war's centenary. It was modest, understated, in keeping with the animals it honored. But the 30,000 dogs who ran through artillery fire, who found the wounded in the dark, who carried words between men who otherwise would have died without ever speaking them, they didn't need a monument to prove what they had done. They ran when no one else could. They came back when no one expected it. They did not ask to be remembered, but the least we can do, the very least, is to remember them anyway. Thank you for spending this time with Silent Guardians. Every story we tell is chosen because it deserves to be remembered, and you deserve to know it. If this one stayed with you, you might want to be here for the next one. We'll see you then.